Okay, we should be live. Hello, Naina.
Yay! That's our girl.
Yes. Okay. So, as usual, we're going to just like hang out for a couple minutes. I didn't have like a fun book question.
So, as usual, we're going to
sorry. I was like, it's not even me. What's going on?
I looked at my tab and I'm like, it says muted. Why do I hear myself? Being surprised with the sound of your own voice.
Always so no fun book question?
I mean, we can. Okay, the one we did for our crafting live show yesterday, I think could be a fun one if we want to just do this spur of the moment. But in honor of the Goodreads Choice Awards happening, to everybody's great frustration, we can talk about a 2022 release that we think got snubbed, that we want more people to talk about. So if you want to open Goodreads, please.
I was going to say, that implies that I've read a single release that came out this year.
You've probably read more than you thought, because I was like, oh, I know I didn't read as many as I did last year. And I looked, and I don't think I did, but I've actually read a lot.
Well, I know at the beginning of the year, I did listen to a couple galleys. So at the very least, I have those.
Right.
Yeah. I think I've read maybe 2 2022 releases.
Well, if
and one of them was a hit. So
then just pick a book to talk about then. I might do...
I wonder... Okay, no, never mind. I wondered, and then like Goodreads literally answered my question as I was thinking it. It was very impressive.
Nice.
Do you guys hear the wind?
I do.
I don't know what is up with the wind today.
Now it's a siren.
Yeah. I don't know if it's just like the way it's hitting our building, but like we woke up to like the howling of the wind.
Wow. Creepy. You are bringing gothic atmosphere, Taylor. Thank you. Taylor's like, I am lighting. So on theme that I...
Yeah.
Okay. I think I have my book ready. So do you guys want me to go first as you look? Or okay. So I am honestly really surprised that this one wasn't nominated. Like, it seems like something that would make the Goodreads Choice Awards, but whatever. So I read Bloomsbury Girls by Natalie Jenner, which I loved. It's a historical fiction. It is set at a bookshop, but it's not as focused on that as other books are. But I love these characters so much. And one of the things that I loved most about it is that like all of the women are friends. Like at no point is there like the evil bitchy mean girl that they have to like, defeat or win over. And it talks a lot, very appropriately for Past Classics. It talks a lot about like the canon and like who was left out of the canon. And like part of the book involves trying to find this manuscript by a female writer. And it's also set like immediately after World War II. And I don't read a ton of World War II historical fiction, but I feel like this is a really interesting take on it because it's not set during the war, but obviously people are dealing with what happened as a result of that. And like you're seeing how it's like obviously changed everyone's life who like lived through this. And yeah, I really loved it. Female friendships are great. I love the talk about like, classics and novels. And it was just very engaging. Like it was one where like I expected to enjoy it, but I was like surprised at how much I really, really loved it. So that's my recommendation is Bloomsbury Girls by Natalie Jenner.
Nice.
Yeah. I'll have to add it to my Goodreads list.
I think I have added it on Goodreads already. That or her other book. Let me just verify. Okay.
Loud. Yeah, apparently the wind is loud everywhere. Yeah, it's when you're
scary when it happens. You're like, oh,
yeah. All right.
Like, have you ever had it get your car door and you're like, oh my gosh?
Yeah.
Taylor, do you need more time?
So I'm realizing now I really have actually only read one 2022 release because I've been on my Ellen Hildebrand stuff. So I'll just say the book that basically everyone was talking about when it came out, but I'm glad my mom died, which is
Yeah.
the Jeanette McCurdy memoir, autobiography.
I think memoir, yeah.
Yeah. Which, if you don't know, she played Sam on iCarly, and it's sort of discussing her life growing up as the daughter of like a stage mom and sort of like the abuse she went through. It's really good and really insightful. Sorry that my 2022 release book is depressing.
No, I expect it's going to win the memoir category. I would be very surprised if it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. And I will also go back and link all of these after the live show. So, Julia, you're up.
Okay. I'm debating between two. Okay, I'm going to shout out, because it's my girl, I'm going to shout out the Sinister Summer series by Kirsten White. The first 2 books in it both came out in 2022 because she writes like nobody's business. She has like at least 2 books coming out next year too. I don't understand her, but I'm grateful I picked the right person to stand because she is always writing. And yes, Nana knows because we buddy read them. But it's a middle grade series about these twins and a series of misadventures that they go on because they are staying with their aunt for the summer, but they don't really like remember where their parents are or like what's going on. And their aunt is very strange and like doesn't ever answer any of their questions. And so the first one takes place at a really creepy water park, and then the second one takes place at a super creepy spa. And there's like lots of different like paranormal-ish elements, and I think we're going to see lots of references to like classic Gothic characters. Like the second one was about vampires. It was very Dracula. Yeah, Nana, you know,
it's so weird. I love it.
Yeah.
I think you and Nana sold me on it in one of our other live shows. I remember this happening. So that does
they're just fun. And quick reads too.
Yeah. All right. So I think we're going to go ahead and, well, we're not sure if it's paranormal yet. Only suspect.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if it's not, but okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. This is our discussion for, should have had my book ready, Agnes Grey by Anne Brontë. I think, okay, actually the first part of this probably will be spoiler free, so I will mention when we get into spoilers if that's something that you are concerned about, especially because this is like a lesser known classic. So I feel like it's feasible that a lot of people might not actually know how this one goes. Like I didn't the first time I read it. Okay, so before we get into the actual discussion, a couple of like announcement things. So we have decided that Past Classics is going to take December off, just because we figure, you know, a lot of holiday things going on, and it'll give us some more time to like plan and gear up for the Classies that we're doing again in January. We're very excited. And also at some point in December or January, we might even announce it this month if we decide, but we'll announce our next group of books so that you'll have plenty of time to like prepare for that. Yeah, so we're very, very excited. We have some exciting things coming up, obviously, because we always get to pick our own books. So we're always excited about it.
It's a tried and true method, okay?
It really is. It really is the only way to run a book club, honestly. Okay, so we can just do like quick intros if you guys want to. I don't know who went first last time, but if you just want to highlight your channel maybe a little bit. I know that you guys are both very busy, so you've been sort of like taking a hiatus, which is fine. So
yes, I'm Julia. My channel is Shakespeare and Such. I like to read a lot of historical fiction, historical fantasy, historical romance, classics, obviously middle grade and YA, and a decent plethora, not as great as Kara, but a baby step in that direction. And yeah, that's it.
awesome.
And I'm Taylor from Page Screen Taylor, and I also am on hiatus indefinitely. indefinitely leaves the door open for me to post again one day.
Yes.
And I read classics, romance, fantasy, like across a lot of genres, but mostly I've been on a romance and Ellen Hildebrand spree. So that's what I'm focusing on.
Nice. Your Ellen Hildebrand era. I love it. Hi, everyone. I'm Kara. My channel is obviously Wild Book Garden since we're here right now. I read pretty much everything. I would say the things I read most are fantasy, historical fiction, nonfiction, and contemporary. Shockingly, never thought I would actually read that much contemporary. But I do actually dip into like mystery and romance. So I pretty much sprinkle in most genres. And as Julia mentioned, I am very passionate about reading across all age ranges. I will talk your ear off about that if you give me the opportunity. I'm very bitter that the Goodreads Choice Awards lumped every single children's picture book and middle grade book together in one category. So yeah. Relatedly, I have a not a genre book club that is about reading middle grade and young adult books, which are not a genre. So
good segue.
Yes, gotta find a way to plug it. Okay, so we are very excited for our Agnes Grey discussion. We're going to go ahead and start off with content warnings as always. So these are the primary ones that will probably come up in discussion. We have grief, animal death, classism, hunting, and references to and descriptions of animal cruelty. It's not graphic, but that is definitely something that is talked about in the book. So just wanted to mention those things. And I think that's all our introductory stuff. So let's just go into our overall thoughts. If you would like to share a rating, you can. And normally I would say, like, what's your prior experience? But I mean, we read Tenet of Wildfell Hall for another Past It Classics live show.
Yeah.
And sadly, that's Anne Bronte's only other novel. I know that Julia has also read some of her poetry. So yeah, if you just want to give like your overall thoughts on the book, and I know this was the first time reading it for both of you. So yeah, general thoughts. And if you would like to compare it to Tenet, just in terms of which one you liked more, you can. I think it's pretty like widely held that this one is not as good as Tenet, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. we see some eyebrow action from Julia already.
I'll wait.
I can go. So I actually really liked this book, and I think I liked it better than Tenet. I like Tenet, love our MILF, but
our MILF of Wildfell Hall.
But this one felt so like short and sweet, and just I don't know. It felt very comforting to hear like the woes of working back then, because I'm like, girl, this is like me when I had my first like internship or my first job.
Yeah.
And I don't know, her feelings about it, the feelings of being overwhelmed with work and like not knowing how to stand up for yourself just really resonated with me. I like the main character of Agnes Grey. I thought she was like, I loved her. And I think I haven't settled on a rating yet, but I'm between 4 and 4.5 stars. I really like this book.
Nice. I'm glad.
That's great news. As a certified Anne stan, I approve of this rating.
Yeah. Our Anne Bronte support group, like.
Love her. Okay, I did like it. I'm going to preface that. I liked it in it tales just so disjointed to me. And I know we'll get into details about things, but I don't even mind that it was short. It just felt like the pacing was like, here's a little bit about my family history. Here's 100, not pages literally, but like felt like 100 pages of the world's worst family who ever existed on Earth. Then here's like the actual story was like the last half. So it just felt a little all over the place to me. And that was very upsetting because I like loved where the story went at the ending, that the beginning, not that we didn't need those parts, but it just, I felt like it could have been proportioned differently. But I liked that it was a coming of age story because I love those. I did really like Agnes as a main character. And of course, the writing is beautiful, Dan Brontë. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. Well, 3.4 stars, but.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, this is a good reminder that pacing doesn't matter to me. But I think also one thing that helped, this is the second time I've actually read it this year, because yes, Milena, asking about your Brontë weekend. Yeah, I read it for a different live show earlier in the year. And when I went into it the first time, I only knew a few like vague things about it, but I think it helped prepare me for the best experience because I knew that like the first family was the worst, but that she is not there the whole time, which was nice to know because, as Julia said, the world's worst family. Like, oh my God.
Awesome.
And then I also knew that the romance was a very, very minor part of the book and that some people were disappointed in that. So I think I went in with those expectations set.
Okay, great.
Okay. You good, Taylor?
Yeah, I'm good.
No worries. I frequently have connectivity problems, so I just wanted to check. Yeah, I also found Agnes just like incredibly shockingly relatable. Like, yeah, I just like really connected with her. Like the part where she's like, I must never ever tell my crush how I feel. I will die alone rather than say something. And I'm like, same. Like,
that's what I said yesterday in the Valette live show is like one of my favorite things to read about in classics, like either just unrequited love in general, but especially a main character who's just like sitting in their feelings. Like, I love this person and I'll never say anything. Like, I eat that up. So I did love that.
Yeah. In terms of how I compare it to Tenet, I guess I like it maybe a tiny bit less. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, but I bumped up my rating on Tenet to 4.5. So I guess technically I like Tenet a little better. But I do think that Agnes Grey is a really good version of what it is trying to do. You know, like it is a really compelling coming of age story. I did really like Agnes. We're going to get into some of the themes that I think this book handles really well. So I think like a lot of like what I was seeing on Goodreads, a lot of people didn't like Agnes and a lot of people were like feeling like this book wasn't like, not just that it wasn't as good as Tenet, but like it doesn't even rank in like comparison. And I'm like, I actually think Agnes Grey was pretty good. So I'm glad that
Can I
we
just say
mostly enjoy
one
it.
thing?
Yes.
I know people hated it about the Persuasion movie, but I would love to see an adaptation that is like the Fleabagification of Agnes Grey, where she just like turns to the camera and is like, I will tame these children, and then just like goes back to trying to win them over and like just completely failing. I love fourth wall breaks. Sorry.
I feel like I would enjoy like a version of The Office where you're working in this sort of like soul-sucking job, and the only thing you can do is look into the camera and shake your head sadly when one of the kids is being like, I don't know, a murderer in training.
Yeah. Or I think like if it was like a Lizzie Bennet Diaries kind of thing, I think that would work really well. Like, oh my gosh, I'm picturing when the mother of like the first family is like talking to Agnes and she's like, well, they just weren't like this before you came. They've started misbehaving. And I'm just picturing Agnes like,
yeah,
just like dead inside. Like,
actually, wait, can it please be like the camera is over Mrs. Bloomfield's shoulder and so she just like looks past her like, are you hearing this? And then just like continues listening.
Yeah. Okay. So we kind of started talking about this a little already. Let's discuss Agnes, our protagonist. Yeah, like just in general, how much did you like her? I think we'll save the rest of the comparisons to Tenet for the end. But just like general thoughts on her, because apparently a lot of people hate her. So
I don't get
I think
it.
this is like a running thing in all of our live shows. We go online to like research discussion topics, and then we find out everyone hates the protagonist, and we're all like, the protagonist was great.
Yeah, really. This is like exactly
everyone loves. It's like despicable, like D'Artagnan.
Yes.
Is this your king?
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't add up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Would you like to go first, Julia?
I mean, sure. I liked Agnes a lot. It was a hard book to read as someone who works with children and teaching. And it was like, I wanted to help Agnes so badly, but there were also so many things where I was like, I don't even know what I would do in her position, because like, like things that you're trying to do. And she would describe the way she was trying to help these children, and I'd be like, that's 100% perfect, like, you go, girl. And then those little demon spawn would like literally, like knock her down or run away from her into the snow. Like, literally, what do you do when the parents are like, well, your job is to keep them in line, but you're not able to do anything,
right? Like you can give them no consequences ever. Yeah. Also make them perfect. It's like, what?
Or like the one time where they like literally undermined her and went around and like rewarded him, where she was like, you can eat after you finish this reading. And his mother's like, why isn't he eating? Well, he's supposed to do his reading first. Oh, my boy, here's your food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So frustrated. Sorry, I'm getting off topic.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of ranting about bad parenting.
Yeah. Oh my God. It was infuriating. Melena said the first family is definitely something she speed read on her reread. Yeah. It is like painful.
Yeah.
Painful to read. And it's not just like the kids are being horrible, but it's like the kids are being horrible and Agnes is being blamed for everything. And I'm like, it is a miracle that she can stop them from like killing each other. Like, let's just give her some credit, please.
And then I thought the parents were bad, and then the uncle showed up, and I'm like, you're even worse. Like,
God, the uncles. Yeah.
Anyways, I think I have some new gray hairs. Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Agnes was a darling. I loved like being in her head. I loved how like determined she was, not only just like in her actual job, but the fact that she was like, I said I'm going to do this for my family, and so I'm going to succeed at it, even when it's really hard. Like, she's just so good-natured. She's a good egg. I like her.
Yes. Taylor.
I mean, I love her. I love the fact that, I mean, I just related to her as someone who did have a rough go of it my first, like, couple jobs after college, and feeling like, okay, well, I'm going to stick it out. You don't really have any room to complain. At least I didn't have to live there, so I guess I won in that area. But I love that she was just like a kind person who, tried to help the kids as best as she could, but after a while they're just beyond helping. But she's just a very kind person and incredibly smart too. Like, I don't know, I love how much she loves knowledge and like reading, and I related to her maybe a little too much.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask her, what was it that people didn't like about her?
Yeah.
So the prevailing opinion from what I remember from Goodreads is
boring
and like a goody. And I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like she is so genuine about it that it doesn't bother me. Like, she's just a very ethical person. And one of the things that I really connected to with Agnes, which I think I talked about the first time we read this book, I feel like a lot of this book is about how you literally cannot force somebody to care about other people. And especially with like the ongoing pandemic, that is something that just like really, I feel that really hard. And so like, I really like appreciated that Agnes was so determined to do the right thing and, to continue doing her best for these kids, even though they don't deserve it. I really admired her. And as we've been saying, I found her very relatable. In like lots of different ways. There's one part where she's talking about how like sometimes the best part of my day is when I can go to bed and finally cry. And I'm like, we've had days like that. Yeah, like it's just like.
Which was also a scene in Valette where she's like, finally, everyone's asleep. I can cry.
Yeah. I also want to highlight Sarah's very astute point. That's why it's called Agnes Grey, because she has gray hairs. She gives all her readers gray hairs too. These like horrible monster children.
I find it so weird that they call her a goody-goody when I feel like, you know, like what is she supposed to do in a lot of these situations? She's working with kids at the end of the day. Like, I know it was common back then for Victorians to like, I don't know, like swing their kids around by their ankles or whatever weird punishment. But like, you know, she's not allowed to do it, which that's a good thing. But like, you know, she can't do anything, and she's at work for most of it.
For like literally the entire time because she lives there. Yeah. And I also like, I feel like even though there are some parts like, I do feel like with this second family, she's like a little judgmental of the two girls before we have reason for it necessarily. But like, I don't know. I still feel like Agnes is an interesting character and she's still sympathetic. And like, I don't know. I just feel like being a good person does not automatically make you boring or annoying, like in fiction or in real life. And so I like really appreciated Agnes. And like I was saying, I feel like the fact that she was genuine about it, like she wasn't like performative or supercilious, like she really meant all of these things. And there are times where she doesn't do the right thing, but she's always trying her best. Like it just felt very relatable and very like current, you know, as like somebody who's doing the best they can to be a good person. And I also like that even though there are some parts that are definitely like, you know, the Victorian morality, like when we get into talking about Matilda, I think that comes up a lot. But then there are other parts where I feel like she is much more on the side of kindness than what the Victorians necessarily would have thought was the right thing. Like I love that part where she's arguing with the parents of the first family and they're like, well, animals were put here so we can do what we want with them, which was like literally what they believed. And Agnes is like, I think there's some doubt as to that. Like I will debate Bible verses with you all day. And I like love that. I love that she's like, respectfully, you're wrong. Like, yeah.
No.
So, yes, exactly. Well, I'm glad we all liked Agnes. I was like worried about that, like because people really don't like it. This is Fanny Price all over again, honestly. Like,
yeah, people don't like, I feel, kind characters, particularly I feel like kind female characters, because I feel like, not to be like if Agnes Grey were a man, but we would be talking about, a lot of people would be talking about maybe like what a cinnamon roll. And I feel like, so girls can't be too flawed because otherwise they're a bitch, but if they're not flawed at all, just nice people who mind their own business as much as they can, they're like boring.
Yeah.
And I feel like the needle has like skewed so far in the other direction now that like a lot of female readers like read about a woman who's awful and they're like, girl boss. And I'm like, okay, but like, like just because she is, you know, like breaking the rules of society, like doesn't mean I have to be like, that's a great character. Like I can still be like, ooh, no.
Yeah. It's like the people who worship Amy Dunn in Gone Girl, where it's like the point is they both suck.
I mean,
don't get me wrong.
I'm slightly more Team Amy, but they do both suck.
Yeah, Team Amy, but she does take it, I would say, a little bit too far.
Just a little. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, I like how you said that, Julia, because that's something I've been thinking about a lot. Is like, I feel like now I understand why this overcompensation has happened. It's kind of like the not like other girls thing in a way, because it's like, I understand that when these tropes were being written about for the first time, it was a big deal to have a female character who like didn't like dresses and who wanted to do boys things and stuff. And I understand that. And I just feel like now it's gotten to the point where that has been going on for so long that it's like the opposite effect is now we're like hating on girls and on girls who like specific things. And that's kind of how I feel with the like likable, unlikable female character thing is like, yeah, like you're saying, like the girl bossification where it's like, oh my God, what an icon. And I'm like, she is also a murderer. Can we like remember that? Like, so yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like you can girl bossify someone if you acknowledge that they suck. Like I loved Milady from the Three Musketeers. She was
I was thinking about her.
Joy I could eke out of that book. But like she wasn't a good person, but I'm like, well, she was justified. She should have been given a little revenge.
Right, like the first things that she was doing, I was like, yeah, I get it. Like
yeah. And then she's like, I don't even remember a lot of what she did, but I think she killed a couple people or something. She
killed some like random people who had nothing to do with what happened to her, and I'm like,
girl boss.
I'm like, this is different. Hashtag feminism, like, yeah. And Julia said she'll be right back, and we can keep going on without her. Yeah, so I think we're in agreement about Agnes. I think she deserves better from the fandom.
I think so too.
I just feel like this happens so much. Like we were talking about with like the books we read for this like book club. So often this happens. I really think people, not everyone obviously, but there are some readers who just like, they pick up a classic and they want every single female character to be Elizabeth Bennet. And like, I love Lizzie, but like not everybody has to be Lizzie. Like, calm down.
And not every person in, like, not every woman is the same person.
Yes.
It's almost like that was the point all along.
It's almost like women are people. Like, yeah, or it's like not all of them have to be like sassy in like a very specific way. Like I remember when we were talking about North and South and people were complaining like, oh my God, does Margaret Hale ever grow a spine? And I'm like, first of all, she's one of the most stubborn people in this whole book. But like, yeah, anyway.
I also feel like it's a sort of way to, obviously not maliciously, but subtly like, dunk on is not the most academic word. Dunk on what is seen as more like feminine traits. Mm-hmm. Like they're not saying like, oh, to be like soft and gentle is bad, but they are sort of insinuating like being that way is like, you know, it's bad. It makes you
an anti-feminist. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, well, the point of feminism is that everyone of all races, abilities, genders, sexualities, etc., can do what they want as long as no one is getting hurt. And it's like, who's getting hurt from like Fanny Price, like standing against a wall, judging everyone?
Fanny Price, who probably has never even killed a spider in her life. Like, who's getting hurt? Yes, I agree. I think you guys said that beautifully. Thank you for defending my point.
Gladly.
Sometimes I ask questions and it's like, let's talk about this. And I'm like, I hope that you guys think what I think, because otherwise I don't know how to like lead this part of the discussion.
When that day comes, it's going to be a spicy debate.
Yeah.
I mean, it does happen sometimes where we have like very different opinions on things. And I don't mean that like, I only have a good time in the discussion if everyone agrees with me. But when you prepare the questions and you're like, I'm kind of assuming it's going to go a certain way. So I need to do some quick thinking if it doesn't.
Julia, we should have gotten together beforehand and just open with Agnes Grey wasn't girl boss enough.
Yeah. I wish she was more like Milady,
Just kills a few people,
She didn't build her empire enough.
Yes. So let's talk about, while we're on the subject of Agnes, she's obviously a governess, and that is a big element of this book. Also ties into class a lot. So if you want to talk about those together, we can. But yeah, just like thoughts on how this book portrays being a governess, maybe how that differs from maybe other books of the period, anything like that. Just general thoughts. I don't remember who went first last time. Sorry.
Honestly, me neither.
I don't either.
We got distracted by defending Agnes. Well, okay. I'll say this right off the bat. That again, interesting because I was just talking about Villette yesterday, so it's all fresh in my brain still. Where again, like she's a teacher, and would get like so offended at like certain points in the book. Again, not this book, where when she was like a lady's companion or whatever, and people would be like, "Oh, are you a lady's maid?" And she'd be like, "No, I'm not a lady's maid. Are you crazy?" Like so offended. I was like, "You're a step above that. Like, calm down." But the like reading about governesses and teachers and similar fields in this time period is like just like very salient to me as someone who has been a teacher for 6 years. And okay, we already know like education is so important, and it's like such an underappreciated field in America. And you want to talk about underappreciated, you go talk to an early childhood teacher, because I was teaching preschool and we got diddly squat. I don't even have dental insurance, you guys. Like,
Oh no.
and now this year, like switching to an administrator still in early childhood, it's like, my mom bothers me less about like, oh, are you looking at other jobs? Or like, you know what I mean? Like just things like that, where I'm like, you never said to my face, like, you're working a job that's lesser than you. But this is like an important thing and people are undervaluing it.
Yeah.
And so like, I felt so bad for Agnes the whole time, where I mean, obviously for other reasons too, but her parents and her whole family was like, are you sure you want to be like, I don't know about that. Ooh. And partially because she was so young and pretty naive. And I think they knew and were correct in that she was going to get like chewed up and spit out by her first family, no matter who they were. But yeah, that's just where my brain takes that question. And I don't have a solid thesis to end on.
No, but it's such a good point. It's like, I remember when there was that thing going around on Twitter where people were sharing like their first job. And there were so many women who would answer like, well, I did babysitting, but my first real job was blank. And it's like, caring for children is a real job. It is exhausting and important and undervalued and underpaid. So yeah, I think that is very on topic, Julia.
Yeah. And it is like upsetting that like being a teacher like has not changed very much from 18, whenever this was published. 1847 to now, where like, the kids are terrors, parents can be terrors, parents don't always do something, or they spoil their kids too much. They don't always like look at the teacher's point of view and stuff. So
I also think it's interesting, like one of the things that the book I think really focuses on is like, it's not just that being a governess was like lower class in the family, but it was like this weird like no man's land where like the servants were like, oh, she thinks she's too good for us, and the family was like, well, she's definitely beneath us. So like Agnes had nobody, until she started finally in the second family, she started meeting some other people. So it just one of, I think, the worst jobs would have been to be a Victorian governess, honestly. Like, it just looks miserable. Yeah, and I do think it is really interesting comparing it to some other novels of the period, because like I feel like a lot of and even like historical fiction now, that's written now, but it's set then and it involves a governess, like a lot of times it's like romanticized in a certain way. Not necessarily like it doesn't tell you anything about what it was really like, but even like Jane Eyre or some of the novels that are kind of modeled on that dynamic, it's like, oh, there's this forbidden romance with like the master of the house, and I really like that Agnes Grey doesn't do that. Like, it feels like a much more realistic depiction of what it would have been like to be a governess. And this is semi autobiographical. Like, Anne based I think it's like both families were based on like actual positions she had, which is horrifying. So yeah, I just think it feels more realistic. I obviously don't have experience with that, but
I'll make an amendment to that. The most realistic that would have been for that scenario would for her to have a crush on
yes,
someone in the household, never say a word, nothing comes of it, and then she just moves on and is like,
yeah,
well, okay, like I'll just keep this to myself.
yes,
Yeah.
Would have been it in my experience.
yeah,
Just like,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
What was I also going to say about that? What were you talking about when you first started talking, Kara?
Let's see, we were talking about class. Oh, being like at a middle ground between like the family
Yes.
and the servants. I
Yes.
think what else we were saying.
Like middle class before there even was a middle class.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. I think what I was remembering my thought about isn't super related to this point, so I'm going to save it for later.
Okay. Sounds good.
What I find wild, sorry,
No,
is that
go Taylor.
It's that Agnes is also sort of considered below the children she's looking after.
Yes.
Like especially in the second home where she has to refer them to the kids as like Miss Blank or Master Blank. And it's like they're like 12. Like why are you first names it's fine. But I just thought that was so wild that like one, it's the parents who are saying that, but two, they feel like so entitled that even the kids are, they rank above their teacher in the household.
Like imagine a classroom like that where the teacher is Julia and then I have to all day go, yes, Miss Pierce. Yes, Master Smith. Like that's crazy sounding.
Yeah.
And that's what she was doing.
Yeah. And like kind of going back to how relatable and also tying into like how miserable it would have been to be a governess when she was talking about like with the second family who I in general 1,000 times better than the first one, but when she's talking about how like she was completely at the mercy of their whims and whatever they wanted to do, and how like sometimes she'd be gotten up at like 5 o'clock because they're like, we want to start early, and she gets there and they don't show up for 2 hours, and then sometimes she's told that they don't need her for the rest of the day, and then she comes back and they're like, where were you? And I'm like, this would drive me up the wall. Like I hate stuff like that.
That's my worst
like,
nightmare.
Yes, I'm like that. It would just be like the worst thing. So once again, I feel like it was very well described because I'm like, I am like physically reacting to this. Like, I hate it. Do we have any other thoughts on the first family that she goes to work for?
They need to get that eldest son looked at.
Oh my God. Yeah. This was another reason why I loved Agnes so much is like I was liking her already, but she really won me over when she like refused to back down about the animals and like, I mean, she had to do something horrible to like protect them, but I was like, yes, you are one of my people. So, what were you gonna say, Taylor?
No, I was just gonna say like not to get like too much into it, but like that kid terrified me. And the fact that his parents either were indifferent to it or his uncle like brought him animals.
Him.
And I'm like, I know like, we didn't know that much about like patterns of criminology and whatever back then, but I'm like, this man is killing small animals. They need to like watch him or something.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He scared me so much.
Yeah. He terrified me. I agree.
And like
would not feel safe around that kid.
All of that like section was so terrible, but and again, this is like teacher hat. I so viscerally like feel like furious, sad, totally just like hopeless thinking about those sections where she was talking about like all three of the children being in the schoolroom and then like one running out the door. And if she had to catch them, then the other two would make their escape then. And like that, like all of that, I'm like, that's so stressful.
Yeah.
I hate them. I hate them
so much.
It was very interesting, like big part like not only teaching someone, but trying to like mold them and make them into a better potential human is based on like connection and just like having a human relationship together. And how could she ever hope to shape any of those demons who like, you know, like had not even a sliver of affection for her? Don't even talk about respect, just like anything they liked about her, I don't even think existed. And so it was like so upsetting to read about her literally like trying to help them be better, either academically or just better people. And it was like nothing. She's like, I'll give you a good night kiss. And she's like, I don't care about your good night kiss. I won't say my line. Why are you like this?
Yeah.
And Agnes was like, that always worked on me and my sister.
No. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. It was like a very visceral experience. And like, I don't even work in childcare. And I was like, I feel this like so like immediately. Like it was, yeah, just like very well done. I think that's one of the reasons I'm glad the book is so short, because I'm like, I could not have taken longer with those monsters. Like,
yeah.
And it's just like, it's so sad and so frustrating, like you were saying, Julia, because like Agnes is trying so hard, but like there's literally nothing she can do. There's no way she can reach them. They have like no compassion for anyone or anything. And then like to make it like the cherry on top of how awful it is like the parents being like, well, why aren't you getting results? And she's like, well, I can't really do anything. Like, or the parents, like that time when the dad came out and yelled at them and they ran inside, and he's like, they're really good at listening. And it's like,
you were gonna whip them, sir. Like,
yeah, it's like,
you.
Like Agnes isn't even allowed to raise her voice at them. Like, she's not allowed to like do any kind of like withholding of like treats or anything. Like, and it wasn't even like she was like, you can't eat dinner, you know, sending them to bed without dinner, which I always think is kind of like, you know, not great for kids. She's just like, you can't eat until you finish your lesson. And then, like you were talking about, Julia, their mom's like, oh, here. It's just like,
yeah.
So frustrating.
I'm sure you really related to it, Julia, especially because she's sort of like a first year teacher. And my dad's a teacher. And from what I understand, like the first year is like the worst year. Because like part of it is you come in with all of these like ideas that the kids are going to be like all 100% sweet all the time. And then, I mean, when my dad first started teaching, he started sleepwalking because he was so stressed.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he was having like parent-teacher conferences in his sleep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's intense.
It was tough. And to be fair, I would have loved to see Agnes Grace sleepwalk and like start teaching a lesson.
It'd probably be the only time she'd ever finish the lesson. Like, when they're not there.
No, with her luck, she'd be sleepwalking like, come back. Just trying to still round them up.
Yeah.
It is true though. I'm very blessed to be a tall human being, so that way I just seem imposing and like I know what I mean.
Physical authority.
Yeah.
I like it. We can also, if we have any more to say about, like, I'm not even looking up their name. I'm like, you guys don't deserve it. I hate you guys so much.
There's a Bloomfields. I know it because in Michigan, there's a Bloomfield Hills. And so I just kept thinking about driving through Bloomfield Hills and that awful family.
Okay. So if we have any more thoughts, we can talk about them, but we can also move on to talk about the second family, which I should have looked up. I have like a character list here and I
don't know their name.
Let's see. Murray.
Oh,
so the Murray family.
Right.
So I do have a couple of specific characters to talk about. Basically, I think like the two young women that she's teaching are like the prominent characters in that family. So let's start with Rosalie. She's a treasure. Thoughts on her?
Taylor, you want to take it away on this one?
There are many thoughts. Part of me is sympathetic because her mom keeps indulging her like vanities. And Agnes Grey, being the girl boss she is like, I'd rather not compliment them on their looks because that's not the only thing there. But her mom like indulges her and makes her believe like, oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, you have to marry someone wealthy, and sort of like encourages her to think that she's better than everyone else. But then she's an adult and it's like, oh, you haven't done any sort of reflection whatsoever.
Yeah.
But once again, I think all of the Murrays are better than the Bloomfields.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're definitely not as like, impossible to work with. But the entitlement of Rosalie and the other Murrays did really grind my gears and is like a taking advantage of Agnes, just not in an immediately like noticeable way. And I think Rosalie definitely contributes to that a lot, being the oldest and the most like aware of how to make Agnes's job harder.
Yeah. Yes.
Very true. Yeah. Dang it. In the middle of what you were saying, Taylor, I had a specific thought and then I lost it again. I'm so good at that. I'm so good at forgetting things. But yeah, I mean, because when you were talking about like the vanity piece, and it is, I think it's even worse sometimes. Like it's one thing for a mom or whoever to be like very indulgent and be like, oh, my pretty girl, da da da, whatever. Like that's not great, but it is what it is. But then like when she is objectively a really pretty girl, like that's seeping in there hardcore, and that's like so impossible to change because she's like, yeah, I am, and that's my main characteristic, and I'm gonna lean into that, and it's a lot. It was weird because I like didn't hate her, but at the same time I was like, I need you to develop like a positive trait that I can really latch on to. Like,
yeah,
I just need something.
Can we have one nice thing, please? Like,
yeah.
I did not hate Rosalie. She was a really interesting character because even though the book is so short, I had like wildly different feelings about her in some some parts of the book, because initially, I mean, her, especially Matilda, who we'll get to in a second, but like we were talking about this a little before, I do feel like we were supposed to judge Matilda and Rosalie even before we saw evidence of it, like we were supposed to think of them as like bad before we even had evidence. So I felt sympathetic towards her. But then when she started, like the things that she does to Agnes, the way she's trying to wreck, the way she's trying to wreck poor Agnes's only chance at happiness, like I was so angry at her. But then when we see what happens with her, I felt sympathy for her again. So it was interesting. I also, I have to admit that there are like little things she does where I'm like, this is a bad thing to do, but like I understand it. Like when she's like, when she's talking about how like she always like walking instead of taking the carriage because people can like look and admire her, and I'm like, I mean, not a great thing, but I like you were saying, Julia, she's been told her whole life how beautiful and perfect she is. It's like, of course she wants to get compliments from people. She just, I think she came across as like you were saying, Taylor, she doesn't have any self-reflection. So that's what made her, I think, hard to like, because she was like, when she's talking about all the hearts that she wants to break and everything, that's something where like, okay, that impulse can be understandable. It's like, she wants to be wanted. A lot of people do. But there's no reflection from her about what that would mean for other people. Like the way that she treats Mr. Hatfield, who is also very unlikable, but like, I do feel kind of bad for how everything went with him. So I don't know. She's a very interesting character. I think she has more depth than I initially thought, especially in the way that she handles everything with Mr. Hatfield, because I feel like from the way her dialogue is written, she is like, she's so vehemently like, and it was easy for me to turn him down. I don't care about him at all, that like it feels like she's overcompensating, like I think she reminds me a little bit of, is it Mariah Bertram from Mansfield Park, where it's like, you're awful, but I do feel kind of bad for you because like she never thought that she would actually fall in love with somebody, and then she does, and she like can't do anything about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like where Agnes ended up is like the logical conclusion of her character as it was, which is like marrying for money and status and not really looking like, is this man a good man? But it's also like, it's really harsh because I'm like, she's not a nice person, but I felt bad to see her like so miserable in her
Yeah.
home. Like her husband
Yeah.
doesn't talk to her, her mother-in-law like sucks, and
Yeah.
he has a baby, but like it's not a boy, so her husband is mad at her for that. And it's like, I did feel bad for her when she had to like, not had to, but she like asked for Agnes Grey to come back, and I'm like, she's like really lonely.
Yeah.
And she still can't bring herself to really like, humble herself or like,
yeah. And the fact that her mother like pushed her into this, because like and I assume her father as well, like Rosalie is pretty flippant about Sir Thomas. She's like, oh yeah, he sucks, but like whatever, I have to marry him. But she's really young, she doesn't know any better. Her parents absolutely did, and I just think that's so sad. Like, yeah, she's in a miserable marriage, she has nobody else, she has no one who really cares about her. It feels like her punishment doesn't fit the crime, like she is selfish, she's very mean-spirited sometimes, she's not likable, but like I don't think she deserves what happened to her either.
Yeah.
And I think maybe Agnes feels like that as well.
Yeah.
Because I do think like even though she does some awful things sometimes, oh my gosh, like what was that scene when they were just going around the village like insulting people? That was wild.
Yeah.
But I truly think like I genuinely, and this is like mind-boggling to even say out loud, like I don't think she's malicious. I think she's just that egocentric that she's like, I'm the best. What I'm saying is true. What's wrong with that? And like, and again, like was so young for, most of this that it just kind of, it was what it was. Like that was her life and how she perceived things. So she's like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I haven't been told I can't do otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she kind of like, there were even parts that she was kind of like fun or funny. Like there's that part where she's telling Agnes, like, I'm going to be single and have a great time for as long as I can. And I'm like, you go, girl. Yeah. Like, like the way that she goes about things is awful, but like her, I don't know, some of her like instincts, like the fact that she just wants to like have fun is I think understandable, like she's just, yeah, like you're saying, Julia, I don't think she is malicious. I do think that she's very selfish, and that is why, like, again, with the lack of self-reflection, she kind of is like deliberately, like I think she's smart, so she knows that she could think about something from other people's point of view and she doesn't want to. So she's kind of like willfully ignorant, but
that tracks. I love
she's
too
an interesting one.
When Agnes was talking about her, I don't know if it was when she was turning like, I don't know, 15 or 16 or something. And she was just like, and now I want to learn languages and instruments so I can show off. Like, I mean, mood. Like, what are we expecting? Like, oh yeah, I want to learn the piano forte to become a singer-songwriter. No, I want to show off at parties. Like, yeah.
That was one of those parts. Like, there are several things like that where I'm like, I feel like Rosalie is saying what everybody is thinking, but nobody's supposed to say out loud. You know, like that's like what they were supposed to do. Is like, I mean, like Agnes is talking about like the only accomplishments she wants to learn are the ones where it's like the most impressive for the least amount of effort. And I'm like, I mean.
Same.
I don't blame her.
Work smarter, not harder.
Mm-hmm. That's Rosalie.
That's right. Rosalie had it figured out. Let's move on to Matilda, her sister.
What an icon.
This is one of the things where like I feel like Agnes was kind of judgmental, but I think that's because of like the Victorian time period, you know, is like
Mm-hmm.
tomboy. Oh no, she wears pants.
Yeah.
She swears. She pets dogs, you know, like none of the things, like Matilda is not a nasty person. So like every time Agnes would talk about like what an unpleasant person she was, I'm like, she's not though. I mean, she's coarse, you know, but she's not like mean spirited like
I will say
Rosalie.
she was mean to her dog.
That's right. That's right. She was.
True.
I forgot she was the one who did that. Yeah.
Sorry, not to interrupt you, but I was
No. Like
she's
it's true.
a
It's
dog
true.
that I know nothing about.
Yeah, but it's like Eloise on Bridgerton like seems like such a modern perspective of like, and here's the rebel sister who doesn't fit into society. But it's like, no, they literally were like writing characters like that back then. Like, whoa, she doesn't fit in. She's so wacky.
Yeah. I actually kind of liked Matilda. Like I thought she was fun. And I felt so bad for her when like her mother especially was like, you need to make her a lady. So like they didn't let her go to the stables, they didn't let her ride. They like she was miserable. She had like nothing to do. They basically just like crushed her spirit.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the like values dissonance pieces of this book where it's like for the time period Matilda would have been seen as just a bit as big a problem as Rosalie, but for modern readers it's like she can wear pants if she wants to, you know, like again there was the dog thing, and so I think she is also very selfish in certain ways but not to the extent that Rosalie is. So
No.
anyway, I just kind of monologued about Matilda. Do you guys have thoughts on her?
I mean, I do agree with you. I like felt bad for her because, you know, sometimes it is hard to like put yourself in the position of the writer in 1847 where that was like considered very inappropriate to do. So when they were like trying to get her to be a lady, I'm like, why? She's not doing anything wrong. You know, let her ride her horses and go hunting and hang out with dogs. And so I did feel bad for her in that regard, and how sort of like a part of her that was so important to her was like stripped away.
Yeah, exactly. And I can see why that would be considered poor manners at the time period, you know, everything that she did, especially the swearing, you know, because she's a lady. I thought it was funny though that she
trouble for saying mare. I was like, that's just the scientific word. Like,
I know. It's like so shocking that we admit there's a female horse. Yeah. Like I feel like I could see if she said like gelding or something that would have been more racy because she was alluding to the fact that he had been fixed, but like mare, it's like it's just a female horse. Yeah. Like I can understand for the time period why the things she was doing would have been considered bad manners, but I don't understand why it was put on the same level as being like unethical, you know?
Yeah.
Like it really felt like the way they were talking about her most of the time was like with the understanding that she was just as bad as Rosalie. And I just don't agree. I also thought it was really funny when Agnes is like chastising her for her language. She's like, well, I learned it from my dad. Classic double standard. I just thought that was really funny.
Was it Matilda? I don't know. I mean, you'll tell me. At the end when Agnes is leaving and she like says goodbye to her, and then she's like, she didn't want me to see it, but she was crying. Like that was a sweet moment.
Yeah. I think that might have been Matilda. I don't remember either.
I just like the picture of her being like, well, goodbye.
Yeah. I think her and Rosalie kind of both had that like kind of reaction. Yeah, I don't remember which of them it was who did that, but yeah, Agnes is like, oh, the part where I think it's Rosalie who like hugs her goodbye when she's getting ready to like leave because she's getting married.
Oh yeah,
and like she holds on and like she holds on longer than Agnes thinks and like seems to really mean it. And I'm like, oh, like,
it's like the thing at Disney where they tell the character actors like, let the child let go of the hug first, because like that's what they need. So when they're done hugging, you're done hugging. It's like,
yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. Should we talk about Mr. Weston, our love interest? Very minor. I mean, in a way minor because the book is really short and he's not in it for like half of it, but it ends up being a pretty big part of like the second half of the story, especially from because we're reading from Agnes's perspective. So she's like
Yes.
very in her feelings about it.
Let me preface this with that is why I think the pacing felt so wild to me, was because we spent so long with the Bloomfields, and then she kind of did the same like setup of let me introduce you to the members of the family. So I got settled into that groove, and I thought, okay, this is just a chronicle of families she nannied for, and that's the story, and I'm okay with that. I just like, that's where I set my expectations. And then when we suddenly like were so settled there with the Murrays, and now she's meeting other people, I was like, okay, like I guess this is a part of this section. And then that ended up being the rest of the book, and I was like, oh, so it threw me off.
Yeah, I think like, and this might be because of my edition. Like my edition is like barely over 200 pages, and the chapters are actually pretty short. So to me, it didn't actually feel like we spent that long with the first family. So I think the time distribution didn't feel as inconsistent. But I do think it is unusual for such a short book that we meet such an important character at like 50 or 60%, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's fair. That makes sense. Did you like Mr. Weston? How did you feel about him otherwise?
I do. He's a good egg. Again, I like good characters. I have nothing against a person who's like, I'm here, I'm doing my best. I want to be kind to people. Like,
yeah,
I got no qualms with that.
When his first appearance is he's rescuing somebody's cat, and like his last appearance is he's bringing back her dog, I'm like, you're a good egg, sir. What a keeper. I mean, I know that in general, the Victorian heroes are like the bar is pretty low, but he's like probably my favorite. I mean, I loved him a lot, actually. Taylor, what did you think?
I liked him a lot. Oh, sorry, I just got
really she loves him so much she's getting a little choked up about it.
Gotta hydrate.
No, I really liked him. I thought, like, you know, he's not a very like complex character, but I felt like Agnes needs someone who's kind and simple right now.
Yeah.
And who like shares a similar interest in like helping people, which is something that I really like that they had in common. Like they both liked being helpful and, you know, hanging out with people who sort of need them either for company or for help reading or anything like that. And the fact that they both don't treat animals like, I don't know, like Legos or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I thought that they had a lot in common, and that at least the life of a vicar's wife is like so much calmer than dealing with you know, the little kids.
And I love that we got to see her like running a school with her mom for a little bit first. Like I liked that transition, you know, into that. So sorry, Taylor, I didn't mean to.
No, I agree with you. Definitely. I thought that was like incredibly charming too. And I was like, honestly, running a school I think would be better for Agnes because she can like step away and take a break.
Yes. Yeah. Like Agnes's mental health, I think, improved dramatically when she started doing that. Yeah, as I said, I really loved Mr. Weston. And I think this is another thing that my expectations helped. Like I'm talking about the first time I read this book, because like I knew, like I think I was prepared for the romance to be even less of a focus and like even more disappointing. Like I know some people were like really disappointed in it. So well, and like how much time it got, I think, and how much like development you got. So like the first time they have a scene at Nancy's together, I was like, oh, we actually get them like interacting and talking. This is fun. And I also love that like he's one of those, he's like very like stern and like quiet looking, and you wouldn't think that he's a really compassionate person, but he is. And also like the way she describes when he smiles and everything, I just thought that was really lovely. And I agree. I like that they have so much in common about helping people, and like also like not in a condescending way, you know, like we see such a difference in how he and Agnes interact with Nancy and the other cottagers versus the Murray girls, you know? Yeah, so I really enjoyed Mr. Weston. Like he made an amazing first impression when he comes in rescuing Nancy's cat, and he just like continued to be a top tier love interest for me.
They were so well matched.
Yeah. I do love that the Murray girls were like handing like poor people like bread or whatever, and they're like, it's a shame they're so hideous. And the person's like 2 inches away from them.
Yeah.
Like, imagine accepting that bread and just being like, I don't do I eat this now? Like, this feels wrong. Like,
yeah.
Can I hand the bread back to you?
Yeah.
Am I too ugly for bread now?
Yeah, like the running commentary Agnes tells us about like the way they like talk about them, like when they're right there, it's like or like making fun of how they talk and then it's like, well, of course now they don't want to talk to you. Like, yeah, it just felt really bad. Like, it's bad enough being a Victorian peasant or like tenant farmer, and it's like now people are judging you for it. Like, well, why aren't you more attractive about it though? Like, couldn't you be like a prettier farmer? That would be great.
Like you've done a lifetime of hard labor, like no lotion or anything, moisturize.
Some SPF at least, like
hello.
Yeah. I don't know if this is really, we kind of already talked about this, like, but if we have any other thoughts on like how having a romance subplot functioned in this book, like if you I don't know if that makes sense, but like basically what it did for the story, if anything. Like if you think there were like specific reasons that you liked having it here or that you think it didn't work. I know, Julia, you talked about how like it was kind of unexpected because you thought it was just going to be like a day in my life as the most mistreated governess in the world. Like,
yeah, I had truly resigned myself to being like, okay, this is the nanny diaries, and she's going to regale us with all the families she's worked for, and I'm going to get like a taste for all these different people, and you know, hopefully it's like a little bit of a better situation by the end. So even though it was unexpected, it was, I guess, a better ending in that, like, oh yay, the character I like gets to be happy. She's not saddled with these awful humans. Like, so that's good. I liked it. It just, it like kind of came out of left field for me. And I was like, at first, you know, just being like, oh, cute, she gets to have a crush on a guy. And I was like, wait, is something happening here? Oh,
yeah. I like that it gave some joy to Agnes, you know, even in her very unpleasant work life. And I also like that, so we get a little bit of information about like after they married, we hear a little bit about their life and their kids and what they do like for the community. And I really like that Agnes feels like the exact same person before and after she gets married, you know, like obviously she's not like running a school anymore necessarily, but like she's still like working with the community in the same way. And I like that. I like that it wasn't like she got married and now her personality is totally different. Like she's still very intelligent and very caring, and she's like a very active person still, and I really like that.
Yeah. Can I just talk about a really cute Mr. Weston moment?
Please do.
I just like remembered this, but when he gives Agnes the flowers and she keeps them in a vase for like until they wilt, and then she takes the petals and presses them into her Bible, and apparently like she was like, at the time of me writing this, they're still in there. And I'm like, stop, that's so cute.
I love that. Like, and the part like before that too, where he's like, I remember you telling me that they're one of your favorite flowers. And she's like, you remember that? I'm like, it's so cute. Yeah. I really liked the romance. I mean, I would have liked to see even more of them interacting, but I was happy that we got as much as we did.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We're finally near the end of my questions. I feel like this always happens where like the first part is like so like heavily weighted because there's so many characters to talk about, you know?
Yeah.
Well, before you move on, I will just say like it is interesting that this book, like as a whole, to me, reads much more Austen-like than Brontë-like, in that it's like got that really sweet romance. It's not like this like dark brooding hero that she
Yeah.
falls for. And even with like the heavier things, those almost in the end come off more as like, oh, these were the misadventures of my youth and the people I had to deal with. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's a very different flavor. I think even from Tennant, because it was so heavy in so many ways without being like supernatural gothic, you know?
Yeah.
And you know what? I think that's really interesting that you draw the comparison between Agnes Grey and a Jane Austen novel, because, you know, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre was loosely based off of Jane Fairfax. So I think that's interesting. And I would be interested in seeing, like, was Anne Bronte into Austen? Like, did she draw any inspiration from her?
Yeah, that would be really cool to find out. Yeah, I like that you compared that, Julia, because I hadn't thought of it in that way. But yeah, it's much more like interpersonal in an Austen kind of way, and like you said, the sweet romance and everything. And since we're talking comparisons, let's go ahead and talk about this book as compared to Tennant. I wanted to know if you guys had noticed any things, like any like ideas or topics or themes that you can see Anne Bronte kind of starting to explore in Agnes Grey and then doing more in Tennant. Yeah, if you had any thoughts on that. So like similarities, I guess, and then we can talk about differences later.
I mean, I think we definitely have like you alluded to earlier, Kara, like Rosalie's unhappy marriage and like the idea of kind of having like this toxic husband, but you didn't really know what you were signing up for, and that whole thing.
Yeah.
She ended really succinctly.
No, I agree.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. And you also have, what's the first family? Bloomfield?
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Bloomfield having an argument at the table with the governess right there with his wife about like the food not being great and how she must have failed in some way, and like just being like so condescending and rude to her. So you see that with the Bloomfields, and you see that with Mr. Ashby and Rosalie as well. This idea that like Mrs. Bloomfield isn't a great person, but she's still like sort of has to live to serve her husband or please him in some way. And it's sort of the same with Mr. Ashby, where she couldn't please him by giving him a son, and now he just treats her terribly, and he lets his mother-in-law treat her terribly. And like he leaves her basically very lonely and, you know, lonely and isolated.
Yeah, and I think we really see in both of her novels that Anne Bronte was very interested in and very passionate about women's limited options. Like we see that with the governess thing, but we also see that a lot with marriage. And also I think it's really interesting. Like I feel like there are parts of Tennant that do this, but in a way I think Agnes Grey does it more. Almost talks about toxic masculinity a little bit with the whole like being tough by being cruel to animals and everything. Like I think that's really interesting in the context of the way that Anne Bronte does explore gender. I also think like we see in both books, there is that strong element of religion that is very Victorian, but then there's also places where it's not. Like that part where Agnes argues about the animal thing, and there's that line about like the end of religion is not to teach us how to die, but how to live. And I think that is really interesting in the context of like Victorian Christianity.
I think
yeah.
both.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, I was just going to say, Taylor reminded me when you were talking about the like argument example, one of my favorite lines and one of the like peak relatable moments is when Agnes is like, I don't think I've ever felt so embarrassed for something that wasn't my fault. Girl, same.
Like, new secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah.
And I love that.
I loved that so much. Like, because that is like just universally relatable. She's like sitting there like, oh my God, is this happening?
Like, not to bring up The Office twice in one Classics episode, but there's this episode where Jim and Pam go to a dinner party thrown by Michael Scott and his girlfriend, and the entire time they're arguing, and like they clearly hate each other so much, and they have to sit there in the whole like 3 or 4 hours listening to them just sort of snap at each other, and I'm like, that is my worst nightmare.
Brutal.
Like, not just being there while a couple is arguing, but being there when it's your boss arguing. It's like, oh,
very rough.
Yeah. Julia, what were your thoughts?
I was going to say too that with both of them, we get like the discussions of class a little bit too, with like, again, Agnes being like higher than the staff, but lower than the family. And then of course, why can't I remember her name right now?
Helen.
Thank you. Helen being like, you know, kind of this outcast and being a mother who doesn't have a husband, right? And so everyone's like, ooh, she must be some scandalous woman that we should keep at arm's length. Like, we don't know her story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think class is explored in really interesting ways. And also, similarly to some of the other Brontë novels we've talked about, I feel like there's kind of a mixed track record here, because like there are some parts, like there's that part where Agnes is talking about like the way the servants treat her, and she's like, well, you know, domestics are very suggestible by their betters, or something like that. And it's like, okay, Agnes. But then later, the way she interacts with Nancy is like so different from that. And I meant to talk about Nancy, and I think I forgot to write her down. But so real quick, dinner parties. Okay, sorry, I interrupted myself, and now I don't know which way to go. Do we want to continue? Yes. So, do we want to like talk about her? Because like I really liked her, and I like that she felt like such a fully developed character. Actually, she reminded me a little bit of, what's her name in North and South? Margaret's friend who who gets really sick, or she's already really sick.
I want to call her Betsy, but I don't know if that's
her name. I think it's Bessie. I think you're right. Bessie. Kind of reminded me a little bit of her, and the way that like she is of a lower class, but like they still like they feel like intellectual equals, which I love. And even though Nancy talks, you know, in a lower class way or whatever, I really like that Agnes thinks of her as like the one person, until, you know, she meets Mr. Weston later, but the one person for a while that she can have like thoughtful, stimulating conversations with. I like the way that like Nancy talks about like her experience with religion, and the way that like Mr. Weston handles that. So I like really liked all the parts of the book that involved Nancy. So how did you guys feel about her?
I agree with that. And I also really liked reading about her sort of like questioning her faith, which also brings in this contrast between Mr. Weston and the other.
Is Hatfield, I think. Mr. Hatfield.
Mr. Hatfield, where like Mr. Hatfield's like, oh, you're not sure if you believe in God and you're depressed? Have you tried not?
Yeah, you know? Really? Yeah.
And she's like, I'm too weak to do all of like the standing and stuff or go to church. And he's like, have you tried not being weak?
Yeah.
It's literally Villette again, which, wait, Kara, you read Villette.
I have not. No, I'm not reading any more Charlotte Brontë.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Taylor, have you read Villette?
Unfortunately, I haven't.
Okay. Well, there's this scene where like her friend, who's also a literal doctor, is like, I think you need to cultivate happiness. He's like, she literally goes, happiness is not a potato.
This is like Instagram therapy. Like,
I was literally thinking, like, have you tried practicing mindfulness?
I know, like toxic positivity. Wow, it started with the Victorians. Sarah said it's giving Dr. John.
That's him. I need to. Okay, yeah. So she literally goes, happiness is not a potato to be planted in mold and tilled with manure. Happiness is a glory shining far down upon us out of heaven. She is a divine dew which the soul on certain of its summer mornings feels dropping upon it from the amaranth bloom and golden fruitage of paradise, which is very lovely. But like, just for her to be like, yeah, happiness isn't a potato. I can't just like grow it.
Yeah. the way Mr. Hatfield responds to like any of those problems. I think Taylor, you summed it up beautifully. Have you tried not doing that though? And she's like, or at one point, I think she says something about like how she's still like having difficulty like connecting, you know, or like, you know, like praying in the same way that she's used to. And he's like, well, if you're going to hell, then maybe. And it's like, ugh.
Like,
Yeah.
what do you think your job is, sir?
Yeah. So like, I really like that Mr. Weston actually like talked to her, like,
yeah,
meaningfully,
and like tried to give her genuine like advice.
Yeah, and I feel like the way he was talking about it also kind of went against, like, I like, and I'm pleasantly surprised by the like bad minister, or the one who's not as good at his job, is like will occasionally give like a fire and brimstone kind of like sermon, you know, and that's like the only time that they're really good. But Mr. Weston, who we're obviously supposed to like more and who's better at his job, focuses more on love and on like the positive aspects, which like again, not really what the Victorians were all about. So
very progressive.
Yeah, I like that. It's like, I know that people criticize both of Anne Bronte's novels for being like too moralistic or having like too much religion in them, but I feel like she does it in a really thoughtful way.
Yeah.
So I really liked the way that was handled.
Yeah, and I also feel like in Agnes Grey, like especially like Agnes's relationship to religion is like for the most part very personal, and like it's she's not always preaching, and when she does, it's kind of like for good reason, like, hey, you shouldn't kill animals because God doesn't like it.
Yeah.
But like, you know, she's not always like, it feels very genuine. Like she's not trying to like, exactly like force her religion upon anyone. It's just, this is what she feels. This is what most of the people in her life feel like. And then sure what Anne Brontë, and because her dad was a vicar.
That's what I was going to bring up too. Yeah.
Yeah. That's just sort of like the environment she grew up in. And I don't know, it makes sense for there to be a lot of appeals to religion and appeals to God. And none of it feels very like malicious.
Right. It's like, they're not like, I think in Tenet, we talked about this too, where like, I think Anne Brontë is very strongly against like the weaponizing of religion. So even though it is such a big part of like Helen's character and Agnes's character, like for example, when Helen talks to I think it's near the end of the book, she finally talks to like the vicar of the new town she lives in, and he's like, well, it is your duty to God to stay with your husband. And she's like, absolutely not, sir. Like, you know, like she's very like Anne Brontë, I feel like, is fairly progressive in the way that she uses religion in her novels. So yeah, I really liked that as well.
And I like that you mentioned it being like a part of the character too, because I think there's a huge difference in like the book, like the narration itself, like preaching like this is what the character should have done because God said so, versus like a character explaining their actions like, well, I believe that it's important to be nice to people.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Okay, that checks out.
Yeah, exactly. It like we were talking about Agnes being such a genuine character, and I think that's why she doesn't feel like overly preachy to me. Like there are those parts, like we were saying, with like the way she talks about Matilda, you know, that aren't as forward thinking, but like overall she is a very like, I noticed there's some parts where she thinks of not, I don't know if like the proper way, or like the, like even when she's talking about those like, you know, fire and brimstone, you are a sinner kind of sermons, like those normally would have been considered I don't know, more in like almost a positive light at the time, like most people, or at least that would have been like the prevailing opinion. And even though Agnes acknowledges that that's like the best speaking Mr. Hatfield ever does, she also talks about how like he didn't mean it though, like he didn't actually care. So I like that we get those moments where like Agnes kind of references the like proper way to think about things, but then she's like, I don't think I believe that though. Like I just think that's, I don't know. I really like how that was done. And we see that too with Nancy, and like that part where I like that, I don't know if it's Nancy telling the story or if it's Agnes like narrating and like reflecting on it, but somehow we start talking about like the way that Nancy would like read the Bible herself and like kind of interpret things and kind of think about what she believed, and how like Mr. Hatfield was like, no, you have to let me tell you what to think about it. And like that's also something that I don't think would have been especially common at this time. Like I know with like Protestantism in general, that is like more of a focus, you know, is like being able to like read the Bible yourself. But like I don't think in this era it would have been like seen as like such a positive alternative to like letting the rector tell you what to believe about everything, you know? So
yeah. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say something and it was gonna be great.
And it sure was gonna be great. I'll tell you what.
Yeah. Oh,
we'll take a
sorry,
Yeah,
I
go.
remember what I was gonna say. When you were talking about people complaining about Agnes being too moralistic, I did start thinking like, well, she's a governess. She's supposed to be like a good example to the kids, and especially with religion, like governesses weren't exactly religious instructors, but they would teach like out of the Bible, like how
Yeah.
to read, or they would teach, or they would pray with kids before bed and stuff. So like
Yeah.
being like the sort of like moral compass and being like a sort of religious guide is part of being a governess, even if they're not like official duties.
That is a great point, Taylor. She was fulfilling her duties. Yeah. And I just keep coming back to like how inclusive and expansive her view of religion is, you know? Like it's not that she doesn't moralize and not that she doesn't like think about things that other people do wrong, but like she's still a very forgiving person. And I like that even though religion is obviously very important to her, and it does like she does filter a lot of her like decisions and like ideas through that, but it's almost always in a very positive way, you know? And yeah, I really like that. That was one of the parts of the book I thought was really especially well done, like the way that like her and Mr. Weston and Nancy all kind of like, I don't know, contribute to that theme. Okay, so I think we were on before I interrupted myself and started talking about Nancy, which we were still kind of talking about comparisons to Tenet. So did we have any other thoughts on that? We talked about the religious elements. We talked about gender roles, especially with Rosalie's storyline. I also think that's it feels like a very clear like precursor to Tenet. Yes, yeah. Julia.
I was also going to say I like kind of not the disparity, but like in Agnes Grey, her being able to like reflect on all these real awful families and parents who she met, and then to write Tenet and be like, and here's all the great things that Helen does as a mom. She's the best parent. Like, yeah. I like that growth.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, let me see. Do you guys have any? I realize I didn't give a spoiler warning, but we don't really talk about like there's not really big plot spoilers in this. Do we have any other characters or themes or anything like that we want to talk about before we get into quotes and things?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go.
No, just a slight moment that kind of stood out to me is like kind of cute and very like modern day was when Agnes was sort of like reaching out to other contacts to like be the second family she was going to be a governess for. Her mom like taught her how to negotiate salary. Her mom told her to ask for £50 and like a month off for the holidays as opposed to 2 weeks and whatever she was making before. And I was like, oh my God, it brings me back to like, you know, my parents teaching me like, no, this is how you negotiate a salary.
Yeah, actually, thank you. That's a great reminder in addition to just being a good point, because the Agnes's parents, I did actually want to ask you guys what you thought about them. Yeah, so
I would read a whole book that's just their story. Mm-hmm. I loved when she was like telling us this whole, you know, like preface that was like, and my mom was rich and her parents were like, no, and she's like, I'm marrying for love, and I was like, like, what a great story. And she's like happy.
Yeah.
And her husband is just like, no, you deserve better. And she's like, I literally chose to be with you, honey. Like, we have to move on from this.
Yeah, that's the thing. I love how devoted her parents are to like Agnes and her sister, and like how much you feel like there's a genuine love in that family, which is why it also is like such a like it's a stark contrast from like the other families Agnes's visits, because she expects every family to be like her own because she is sheltered. And so it's kind of a wake-up call when she realizes like, oh, not everyone has like two mostly well-behaved daughters and loving parents who pay attention to like them and their education.
What a sad wake-up call. Oh, not every parent is a good parent.
Yeah. And Mrs. Gray, when Agnes's dad was like, I can't remember if he had already died or if he was dying, and Agnes's mom's father sent her a letter, and she's like, and he was like, now that your husband is on death's door, will you now renounce your decision to leave your life of privilege and wealth for that loser? No.
I love her response to that when she's so like sarcastic about it. You know, she's like, well, girls, what should I say? Should I say I regret my daughters being born? And like all this. I loved Agnes's mom. I also really liked the relationship between her parents. The dad did frustrate me a little bit sometimes because of the way he handled money.
Yeah.
And that like he just wouldn't like everyone else in his family was like, you made a mistake, or not even a mistake. It was like an accident. You know, it wasn't like he did a bad investment or something.
Yeah.
They're like, you know, that happened, but we're okay. We're doing well. Look at how happy we are. We just want you to be healthy. And he's like, what if I just die of shame? Like, so he was like a little frustrating to me sometimes, but I did overall really love Agnes's family, and especially her mom. I just love her mom so much. Like,
also Agnes talking about how she's going to miss her little kitten.
No. Yeah. I was like, that right there would have been like, I think of one of the factors in me deciding not to go and be a governess. I'm like, I'm not leaving my kitty. No. Yeah. Okay. Anything before we get to quotes? Sorry, I feel like I've kept you guys for a long time. There's a lot to discuss with this short little book.
I was going to say, so much to say for a pretty short book.
Yeah.
It's a good book, and I think we had a lot of good discussions.
Yeah.
I think so too.
And I'm also realizing right now, I'm kind of amazed because I can't remember the last time I was the one of the three of us that liked a book least. So
I know.
Thrilling for me. I'm like, whoa, rebel. By 0.5 stars. But I'm good for quotes if you guys are.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm looking through. So if you guys want to start sharing some, this is always the fun part where I'm like, why did I take a picture of this page? Which line did I mean? So
don't worry, I'm doing the, oh my God, I listened to this on audiobook. I'm not a single quote.
I was about to say the same thing. I so badly meant to read the physical copy, and then it came so down to the wire that I was like, just admit defeat, listen to the audiobook, which was great. It was a good audiobook, but now I'm like, well, I can tell you right off the bat that all of like my favorite quotes that actually stuck out in my head were the ones about like her crush on Mr. Weston. Again, I love pining and unrequited love and all that. So probably all the ones I share will be related to those scenes.
Yeah.
Sounds good. They had some great scenes. Like I wanted them to be together even more, but like I really like the way their scenes were done. Like even just like when they're walking together and we don't even hear like all of their conversation. It's just like about the way they interact with each other. I'm like, they just respect each other so much. I love it.
I like this one.
Yeah, go for it.
He had not breathed a word of love or dropped one hint of tenderness or affection, and yet I had been supremely happy to be near him, to hear him talk as he did talk, and to feel that he thought me worthy to be so spoken to, capable of understanding and duly appreciating such discourse was enough. Like, that's so nice.
And I love that the romance is so romantic, you know? It's like Agnes is, I don't know. It's like this, one of the same reasons why I love Anne Elliot's love story so much is like Agnes is very quiet and good and she does the right thing. Hi, baby. But she still gets like a great love story. And I love that.
And also, wait, this isn't a quote. Sorry to interrupt you twice in a row.
No, it's fine.
I do think there is something to be said because, like, you know, in romance, like tropes are fun. That's part of like the romance genre. It's like a convention to have the tropes, right? But you know, like, okay, whatever, friends to lovers, enemies to lovers. Sometimes it's just really cool when people meet and like catch feelings and fall in love. Like that's cool too. I like that.
Yeah. Like I guess you could argue this is like friends to lovers, but it doesn't feel like there's a particular like setup to it, I guess. I don't know.
Vicar to lovers.
Vicar to lovers.
Parishioner to lovers.
Yes. I agree, Nana. Kitty.
He's outside the door, so
I love that boy. I know. I love what brings Nina back into the comments. I love him. So one of the ones that I really liked, we were talking about. This is like with the class discussion and the way that the Murray girls interacted. I could see that the people were often hurt and annoyed by such conduct, though their fear of the grand ladies prevented them from testifying any resentment. But they never perceived it. They thought that as these cottagers were poor and untaught, they must be stupid and brutish, and as long as they, their superiors, condescended to talk to them and to give them shillings and half-crowns or articles of clothing, they had a right to amuse themselves, even at their expense, and the people must adore them as angels of light, condescending to minister to their necessities and enlighten their humble dwellings. Like, what a great send-up of, like, condescending charity, you know? Like,
yeah. It reminds me of those, like, TikTokers or YouTubers who are like, oh, I gave a homeless man a sandwich, and they have a camera right in the man's face, and, like, they're like, oh, people will think I'm such a good person. And it's like, you could have just given them the sandwich. It's fine.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, I took a picture of the whole time, like, their mom is talking about, like, the letter she got. I shall say that he is mistaken in supposing that I can regret the birth of my daughters, who have been the pride of my life and are likely to be the comfort of my old age, or the 30 years I have passed in the company of my best and dearest friend, that had our misfortunes been 3 times as great as they were, unless they had been my bringing on, I should still the more rejoice to have shared them with your father, and administered what consolation I was able, and had his sufferings and illness been 10 times what they were, I could not regret having watched over and labored to relieve them, that if he had married a richer wife, misfortunes and trials would no doubt have come upon him still, while I am an egotist enough to imagine that no other woman could have cheered him through them so well. Not that I am superior to the rest, but I was made for him and he for me, and I can no more repent the hours, days, years of happiness we have spent together, and which neither could have had without the other, than I can the privilege of having been his nurse in sickness and his comfort in affliction. Will this do, children, or shall I say we are all very sorry for what has happened during the last 30 years, and my daughters wish they had never been born, but since they have had that misfortune, they will be thankful for any trifle their grandpapa will be kind enough to bestow.
Love her.
What an icon.
I love it.
That is how you girl boss.
That is.
So I'll share a quote.
Yes.
Julia, you shared the quote I was gonna
Oops.
And I was like, oh God, I gotta scroll through this Goodreads page.
Oh, I got another one.
So this one is, what a fool you must be, said my head to my heart, or my sterner to my softer self.
Mm-hmm.
I love that one.
Okay, wait, I love this one too. But our wishes are like tinder. The flint and steel of circumstances are continually striking out sparks, which vanish immediately, unless they chance to fall upon the tinder of our wishes. Then they instantly ignite, and the flame of hope is kindled in a moment.
Yeah.
It's so pretty.
I don't think we've talked about how, like, good the writing is.
Yes. Yeah. Like, I've seen a couple people say Anne Brontë is a good author to pick up if you're just getting into classics. And I think that's true. I feel like her style is, like, clearer than some writers of this era, but it is still so good, like the way she can have like beautiful lines and symbolism, but then there's also like funny parts and like great character moments. Yeah, I really love it. I'm so sad she only wrote 2 novels, you guys. Like,
I
know. Let's see.
I need her complete poetry works. I had that little sampling and now I'm like, okay, this is all I have left.
I know. I haven't read any of her poetry, and once I do, that'll be it. Here's another good. What's that?
Evilly.
I think he thought I was meowing when I cried. He was like, "Can I help you?"
Excuse? Yeah. Good job, baby. This is another one I love about like hope and also pining. Therefore have done with this nonsense. You have no ground for hope. Dismiss at once these hurtful thoughts and foolish wishes from your mind, and turn to your own duty and the dull, blank life that lies before you. You might have known such happiness was not for you.
Yeah.
Yes, it is, Agnes.
But that quote is literally, "I'm not that girl from Wicked." Like,
Yeah.
Oh, stop.
I love that one. Let's see. Where are... Okay. I think I have a couple more. Feel free to jump in, you guys. I'm just kind of...
yeah, I'll keep scrolling until I find another one I loved.
Oh, I like... Okay. The human heart is like Indian rubber. A little swells it, but a great deal will not burst it. If little more than nothing will disturb it, little less than all things will suffice to break it.
Good.
Oh my God, this little bit with Wes. Should he introduce my moral and intellectual capacities? What is it to him what I think and feel? I asked myself, and my heart throbbed in answer to the question. Like,
yeah, I really love the way that, like, because she's obviously narrating the whole thing. So the way that she would be like, and then I started thinking about how I have feelings. Oh, no, wait, I'm not going to talk about that. Like, forget I said anything. Like, I love that. Yeah, so here's one of those that actually goes into the part I was going to share. He can make friends, and he can make a home too if he pleases, and doubtless he will please sometime. God grant the partner of that home may be worthy of his choice, and make it a happy one, such a home as he deserves to have, and how delightful it would be to... But no matter what I thought. I began this book with the intention of concealing nothing, that those who liked might have the benefit of perusing a fellow creature's heart. But we have some thoughts that all the angels in heaven are welcome to behold, but not our brother men, not even the best and kindest among them.
So good.
Yeah. Here's like a funny one. This is after she's been talking to Rosalie. And she's like, yeah, I wondered why so much beauty should be given to those who made so bad a use of it, and denied to some who would make it a benefit to both themselves and others. But God knows best, I concluded. There are, I suppose, some men as vain, as selfish, and as heartless as she is, and perhaps such women may be useful to punish them.
I loved that part. I was like, that's right.
Yeah. Sassy Agnes. Like, quietly sassy Agnes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like this one too. This is I guess another kind of theme, is like the discussion of like beauty, because unlike some other Victorian novels, this book does not really do the like ugly outside means ugly inside kind of thing. It is foolish to wish for beauty. Sensible people never either desire it for themselves or care about it in others. If the mind be but well cultivated and the heart well disposed, no one ever cares for the exterior. So said the teachers of our childhood, and so say we to the children of the present day. All very judicious and proper, no doubt, but are such assertions supported by actual experience?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really like this book.
Yeah, me too.
It's definitely something I think I would reread in the future, and I don't
Oh,
reread
yeah.
them.
I think
Yeah.
I'll like it more upon reread, having like reset my expectations.
Yes, I think expectations is a big thing for this one. Yeah, I mean, I read it twice in 1 year, and I still really enjoyed it. Okay, so any final thoughts on Agnes Grey? We did mention this at the beginning, but Pasta Classes will be taking December off. So if you've been wanting to catch up on some of our book club picks, it'd be a good time. And our plan is we will start back in January with our second annual Classies. Very exciting. And we also should be announcing our next group of books pretty soon. So pay attention to that. And we are going to, I think, thank you, Julia, for keeping us a little better about updating our Twitter. Also, I just realized we can talk about this after, but maybe we'll consider doing like an Instagram in case Twitter implodes.
Yeah.
I don't mind being in charge of the Instagram. I love being on Instagram. So.
Okay, awesome. So probably Julia will be taking point on that. And then do we want to announce our next book? It won't be until, I guess, February, but if you guys want
like we'll read it during January and then talk about it at the end of January or early February.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh,
thank you for for it, Julia.
We're going to be reading Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I don't know if Milena's still here, but if you are, Milena, I know you're excited. And I already told this to Sarah, so it's not a spoiler for her. But I'm very excited. Has anyone, I haven't read any Virginia Woolf.
I haven't either. I think I've read like one or two of her essays in classes, but nothing, like not a full work of hers.
I've read Mrs. Dalloway twice, I think.
Okay.
So Orlando. So
yay. Very exciting. Anything else you guys can think of to mention?
Thank you for hosting, Kara.
Yes.
Thank you guys for being here and for being so smart and thoughtful as always.
Oh, thank you for the stimulating questions.
I'm sorry it ended up being so much longer than usual. I didn't expect like I knew we'd have a lot of good stuff to talk about, but I wasn't thinking it'd be like almost 2 hours. So if you guys are still here, thank you. Yes, Naina is in favor of a Past It Classics Instagram. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you for anyone who watches this back. I know that we get people who do that, which is very, very kind of you. And we will see you guys in January for the Classies. Very exciting. Bye.